So then we move to round 2. Scott takes Garrett Wilson. Jahmyr Gibbs goes to Jorge. I took Saquon Barkley here. Then the real shocker of round 2 belongs to producer Colin, who takes Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 4th pick of the second round. Andy, your reaction to Marvin Harrison Jr. as a second-round pick. He's never taken a snap in the NFL, Andy, I've heard, and yet he's a second-round pick here.
Okay, so my one issue here, and I actually, in the recap, I wrote that I thought this was actually probably the sanest and chalkiest thing that Colin did. Everything else is crazier than this. Like
you keep saying that. When are we going to get to the craziness? But anyways, continue.
Oh, it's coming. Yeah, I think if there's anything here that we can argue with, it's the fact that AJ Brown was still on the board. Like, there's some in my mind, like totally plausible first round picks who are still on the board here. Kyron Williams is still there, and I get that he gets dinged by Corum a little bit, but man, that was a hell of a year. AJ Brown on the board, coming off back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons, 100 catches last year. Like we can have our issues with the way the Eagles finished up last season, but man, AJ Brown is he's not old yet. He's not broken down, and he's done it again and again, right? Like, and if Marvin Harrison finishes with a year that approaches what is now the standard issue AJ Brown season, I think you'd consider it a big win, right? But that said, I do think this is the right round for Marvin Harrison. I think there'll probably be some disagreement on that front within maybe the Yahoo Fantasy crew. I don't think that Pianowski has him very high at all. But he is walking into, assuming good health, he's walking into like 140, 150 targets, which is probably what it takes to get into this round. He's just as polished and as complete a receiving prospect as you can really ask for. It's just a great setup for him. So I don't think it's difficult to imagine. And then you look at some of the other second round receivers here. I mean, yeah, I think I like him more than Nico Collins in 2024. I think I like him a little bit more than Drake London in 2024. I think I like him at least as much as Chris Olave in 2024. So I don't think it's a crazy round for him. Again, I would take Brown. I think AJ Brown is still a first rounder. He falls to the second round here, but other than that, I don't have a huge problem with it.
Yeah, I think you're immediately going to see Marvin Harrison Jr.'s rookie, like I said, never taking a snap in the NFL. That usually ages pretty poorly for people when that's like your only argument against the player. More so at running back, but still receiver's definitely been that position of late too. You're going to just be, holy Marvin Harrison Jr. second round, but I think really when you start to stack him up at the only one I'm with you is AJ Brown, that like I think it goes AJ Brown tier then into Marvin Harrison, because I think Marvin Harrison is in the same bucket of like Olave or Nico Collins or Drake London, all of these guys. I mean, maybe there's some running backs. Like if you want to build your team that way, right? We have Kyron Williams in this round. We have Derrick Henry in this round. Maybe those guys go ahead of Marvin Harrison and some of these receivers, or at least maybe they should. But still, like I think he has the same floor ceiling combination as those guys. And honestly, like when you stack it up, You're right. Like very conservative projection is just like 138 targets for Marvin Harrison Jr. That's so conservative. And that's like kind of median range of outcomes, which is what you'd say for an Olave. And maybe you'd say it for Nico, or maybe you'd say it for Drake London. But there are some other questions in those offenses. Certainly in Houston, it's more crowded than that, right? So, I think when you really just sit down and kind of stack it all together from an in-position standpoint, this is his tier. Whether if you like him at the top of this tier, cool. If you do like other guys at the top of the tier, that's fine. But I don't think it's actually that egregious of a pick.
There is a phenomenon that I think maybe Colin was vulnerable to here, where there's like people want to have shares of like the next big thing, right? Totally. We see this all the time. We've seen it for years, and so I think that if Harrison finishes his rookie year and it's sensational. By which I mean like 1,250 yards, 1,300 yards. He catches 90 passes. We're getting 7 or 8 touchdowns. I think if you drafted him here, 4th pick in the second round, you're like, hell yeah, that was a win. I totally called it. Well, AJ Brown is probably going to crush that, right? Like AJ Brown's probably going to beat that by 150, 200 yards. He's a stronger candidate for 10 touchdowns. I think he's already given us a 100 catch season. Like I don't know, but you'd still be really excited to get it from the new guy, and you're a little bit less excited to get it from the guy who's done it before. It's just I don't know. There should be a name for that phenomenon. I don't exactly know what it is. Perhaps we'll name it after Colin someday, but I do think that is a real thing and a trap that we fall into.
Other pick you wanted to highlight in this round, like I mentioned some of the names already, you went A.J. Brown right after Marvin Harrison. No wonder you're saying A.J. Brown's such a great pick. You made the pick of A.J. Brown in this round.
Shocker, fantasy expert likes own picks.
Mo takes Kyron Williams, Chris Olave, Nico Collins, Drake London, Derrick Henry. I want to have a Drake London conversation, but first I think you wanted to highlight Derrick Henry here, who's the final pick of the round to Aaron. I'm curious, just because I know how I feel about Derrick Henry. How do you feel about him here?
Yeah, my initial feeling is, man, Derrick Henry could score 20 times this year. Right? Like Derrick Henry's in an amazing situation as pretty much. And I'll get the caveats out of the way. You know, we've seen Derrick Henry's best season already. That's happened. Derrick Henry's 30. He hasn't been bad yet though. And this is Baltimore. This is the most productive running team in the league, as run heavy as they get. He's just the unrivaled number one. Yes, he's tied to a rushing quarterback, but it's a rushing quarterback who isn't trying to take all the goal line carries. So I just think there's a real path here for Derrick Henry to he doesn't even have to be like super efficient. He could get into the end zone 20 times. That's very much in play. His actual ADP at the NFC, the high stakes sites, it's really low. It's way lower than this, which I get it. If you're playing full PPR, you're not as excited about Derrick Henry as you are in other formats, but man, touchdowns play everywhere. And I just think he's so likely to give us, I don't know, 1,100 yards, 1,300 yards, a huge touchdown total. Like, I don't know, I'd probably bet him. He'd probably be behind McCaffrey. I'd say he'd be like my second favorite to lead the league in touchdowns right now.
I'm very much with you. That's exactly how I feel about Derrick Henry, who is, you mentioned, just early best ball ADP from Fantasy Pros consensus data here. 32nd overall player.
It's too low, man.
That's too low. I mean, your boy Sam Laporta's ahead of him. There's some receivers that are, I mean, best ball drafts tend to be more receiver heavy and just more receiver thirsty, but there's some dicey receiver bets or like even just low ceiling receiver bets going ahead of Derrick Henry. Other running backs, I don't know about all that. So yeah, to me, I think Derrick Henry's pretty low ranked here. He's going too low in some of these early drafts because what's the floor ceiling combination for Derrick Henry? I don't think there's a scenario where he's going to get to Baltimore and he just can't play anymore.
Yeah.
Just look at how efficient Gus Edwards was with those opportunities. And I think that Derrick Henry, even if he's older, is going to be better than post-injury Gus Edwards. So I like Derrick Henry there. I do just want to touch on Drake London, who was Dalton's pick, the final pick of the second round. Andy, I think I'm going to ask everybody whose opinion I respect this question heading into the season. I guess I'll ask you as well. I'm not going to lump you into people I respect, but I guess I will ask you as well.
Fair.
I'm a big Drake London guy, right? I love Drake London. I think he can be, by the end of the season, he could be considered like a top 10 real life NFL receiver. I think he's got that in his range of outcomes. Extremely good player. Okay. Very, very he checks all the boxes I want from a wideout, right? Like he does all the things I like. Same time though, he's going off the board here. End of the second round to Dalton. He is in early best ball drafts ADP of 20 overall, not wide receiver 20 overall, wide receiver 12. On certain sites, he is up there as a clear top 15 pick overall off the board. This is a guy, again, I think the film on Drake London has been great. Okay, I think his stats have been a product of his circumstance, not a product of Drake London. And I think the situation is much better here for Drake London. Are we going to get over our skis a little bit too much, Andy, with Drake London? Because here's the thing. Brass tacks, this guy has been wide receiver 39 and wide receiver 35 in his first two seasons. Even just giving him the Kirk Cousins boost and giving him the offensive ecosystem boost, he could get to wide receiver 20. And I think that'd be a great season for Drake London. If Drake London finishes with 81 catches, over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. Are you disappointed by that? Because that's the Devontae Smith season last year, and he was wide receiver 20. So I do think there is a high ceiling for Drake London. I just think the variance is a little bit wider. And I say this as a Drake London guy. Like, I don't people come in here complaining after 81 catches, 1,000 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I don't want to hear it. So I'm just kind of preparing for that part of it. Am I overthinking this? So
here's kind of the way I'm looking at it. And I will say I gave Dalton for the pick because I give Dalton.
Sure.
It's my bit. But why should we think of Drake London like a whole lot differently than we think of Garrett Wilson? Like they're both kind of, they have both been saddled with just absolutely dismal quarterback situations over the last 2 years, and yet their talent is just screaming, right? It's apparent. We know that in a better situation, better passer at the controls, they could have a big year. We've seen the target totals from Garrett Wilson. I guess we haven't quite got there yet with Drake London, but it sure looks like Atlanta is the sort of offense that could just funnel it to 3 guys, which is what we dream of in fantasy, right? Like that can definitely happen. And I don't know. I feel like I can see that sort of 99th percentile outcome for Drake London looks an awful lot like Garrett Wilson. And nobody blinks if you take Garrett Wilson with the last pick of the first round or the first or second pick of the second round, right? There might be a little bit of a difference in terms of target total, but I man, we're talking about 2 pretty good quarterbacks who are both really coming off the same injury, and man, Kirk was as good as anybody for half a season last year. So I guess that would be the way I would frame it. I also think you're right that we're closing in on the best case scenario with this ADP for Drake London. Like we're drafting him definitely at what is probably pretty close to the best possible outcome. But on the other hand, again, I also see him as a super similar player to Wilson in some respects. Again, like 900 yards last year with Ritter and Heineke at quarterback was heroic work.
Yeah, overall, I hope I'm just overthinking this, but I hear your point that we're sort of drafting him maybe not at his ceiling, but we're getting close to bumping up to that ceiling.